Great. So welcome everyone. My name is Segal Fellow Gabby. I'm the director of the Eli J. and Phyllis N. Segal Citizen Leadership Program, where our mission is to inspire, support, and enable continued generations of citizen leaders. We're honored to be housed here at the Heller School at Brandeis University as a part of the Institute for Economic and Racial Equity. And we're thrilled today to have IERE's Director of the Racial Justice and Tech Policy Program, Ezra Tefera, here, along with 2014 Brandeis Segal Fellow Gabby Zilkha, who's a Senior Product Manager with SAP SuccessFactors. So in addition to his role with the RJTP, Ezra is a medical doctor and a global health policy and management researcher with experience in the NGO and policymaking worlds. And among other things, Gabby is also the co-founder and head of product at Res Market. Am I saying it right? A career services marketplace that aims to change the way the world finds work. Both of them are Brandeis or Heller alumni, so yay alums, and they're both passionate about making the tech world a more just place. This conversation is a part of our ongoing racial justice and anti-racism learning community for Segal Fellows, and we were really glad that there was so much interest that we could open this session to the larger Brandeis and Heller communities along with our Segal network. So thank you all for joining us. And as a side plug, we'll just mention that if you happen to be a National Service alum like Gabby, who's an AmeriCorps alum through City Year, we just released today the application to become a 2023 AmeriCorps alum Segal Fellow with Service Year Alliance. So let us know if you have questions about applying. And for today, our topic is on systemic racism within tech policy, particularly focusing on algorithmic bias in artificial intelligence and machine learning. We'll hear first from Ezra and Gabby, and then they'll leave time at the end for discussion and questions. And we welcome you to share in the chat as we're going on, if you'd like, just a brief intro about who you are and what you do or where you study. So Ezra and Gabby, thank you for doing this, for being with this group of live folks, and for letting us record this for people to watch in the future.
Yeah, of course. Happy to be here. Excited to share with you all today.
Okay. Susie, can I share my screen and start the presentation? Okay. So yeah, my PC gets stuck sometimes, so excuse me for the technical issues. Give me one.
AI and technology and all of that scary stuff.
I am really sorry. I think I have opened multiple tabs, and the PC was not having any of it. Anyways, sorry for wasting a couple of minutes on fixing this issue. So I'll start by saying thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And I would also like to extend a special thanks to Susie, Carmela, and the Segal team for inviting me to speak with you all, and for organizing this event as well. Susie has already introduced me, so I'm not going to say much about myself, but just to give you a brief background about myself, I'm a medical doctor by training and served in the health sector for over 6 years in both the clinical and non-clinical setups. But however, I recently shifted tracks to health policy and healthcare data analytics. I'm really passionate about exploring the intersections of technology and racial justice, particularly the implications of emerging technologies such as AIs from a diverse and inclusive perspective. So today I'll be mainly focusing on the intersections of these concepts, racial justice and technology. I'll be discussing an issue that affects societies, particularly marginalized communities, and which is the interconnectedness of structural racism, colorblind ideology, and the more recent topic, algorithmic bias, with a focus on its implication in the healthcare system. So I'll begin by discussing structural racism, which is a crucial aspect to address in this presentation. There are various definitions that exist for systemic racism, but one particularly insightful perspective comes from Parasite, which they define it as the manner in which societies perpetuate discrimination through interconnected, unfamiliar, or unfair systems. Moreover, another noteworthy definition of systemic racism refers to its normalization and legitimization of various dynamics encompassing historical, cultural, institutional, as well as interpersonal aspects. These dynamics consistently favor dominant cultures while generating cumulative and persistent determinantal effects for oppressed cultures. While there is much more to be explored on this topic, I will strive to present additional key points through the presentation. The second issue I will address is the ideology of color blindness. Researchers have categorized color blindness into two types, color evasion and power evasion. The former refers to the practical aspect of the practice of ignoring an individual's race or ethnicity in order to reduce prejudice and potential tension, focusing instead on human similarities rather than differences linked to racial groups and memberships. The latter, however, power evasion, involves the denial, minimization, and distortion of existence of institutional racism. So several studies have shown that colorblind ideologies exacerbate anti-Black viewpoints and excuse racist actions and attitudes. Specifically, these undescribable consequences stem from power evasion. So I'll be mentioning one really interesting study from the psychologists at the University of Illinois that have defined racial ideology as a belief system that shapes one's interpretation and responses to racial stimuli. While Black folks have been going through this colorblind power evasion implications, colorblindness may seem appealing as an ideology, as it allows those who benefit from a racist society to ignore their own privileges and evade responsibilities. So researchers have pointed out that colorblind approaches are actually harmful. A comprehensive review published in the Journal of Counseling Psychology, led by Jacqueline Yee, who is a doctoral student in the clinical community psychology at the University of Illinois, examined over 80 previous studies with more than 25,000 participants. The review analyzed studies conducted between the years of 1995 up until 2019. And the findings revealed that power evasion was associated with higher or greater prejudice against Black individuals and was not effective as an approach to address structural racism. Instead, it actually perpetuated anti-Blackness. So the researchers also concluded that the denial of structural racism was more strongly linked to the evolution or the evolvement of anti-Black prejudice than the prejudice against other people of color. Furthermore, individuals who denied the existence of structural racism were more likely to endure beliefs that societal inequalities is acceptable and that they reported fewer intentions to engage in social justice behaviors. So this study clearly illustrates how colorblind ideology is interconnected with systemic racism, ultimately impacting the health system and also the other interconnected systems and affecting disadvantaged populations in adverse ways. I'll delve deeper into the idea of algorithmic bias, but while I'm doing that, I want you to think about the following questions and come up with your own interpretation of algorithmic bias and how you view it in your practice. So race is evidently a significant determinant of health, and structural racism exists due to reinforcement of discriminatory practices across different sectors, as I mentioned earlier. So this interconnectedness creates systems that embed inequalities in laws and policies. According to a study by Bailey et al., education, employment, housing, credit markets, healthcare, and justice system mutually reinforce practices that allow or encourage discriminatory beliefs, stereotypes, and the unequal distribution of resources. So I'm going to be mentioning some really interesting articles because I found them to be really relevant in the work that I do. So one meta-analysis by Paradis et al. Was published in 2015, which examined 295 studies. They found a significant link between racism and worsening mental health and physical health. So several factors contribute to these disparities. Firstly, the historical context comes to mind. So the history of inner cities has resulted in Black Americans having fewer economic and education opportunities than their white counterparts, and they were disproportionately exposed to higher risks of social risks of social health determinants such as food insecurity, housing instability, limited access to transportations, and the like. Additionally, individuals facing these risks or these risk factors are less likely to have insurance coverage and are more likely to avoid using the healthcare system due to the associated high costs. Moreover, Black Americans bear a high burden of chronic diseases compared to their white American counterparts, putting them at a greater risk of premature deaths. So this was, I think, more pronounced and highlighted during the COVID pandemic. During the COVID pandemic, it has further highlighted the interaction between social risk factors with health and structural racism. So according to a report by the CDC in 2020, certain geographical areas exhibited higher rates of COVID-19 infection and mortality. Black patients in particular had double the rate of hospitalization and deaths compared to what would be predicted based on demographic representations. So I will return to this point later in the presentation to highlight how inequitable use of these healthcare technologies and healthcare tools such as the AI tools that are really popular nowadays in the hospital setups, and how they might contribute or even amplify the adverse outcomes in these marginalized communities. So I want to highlight this really interesting quote by Martin Luther King. So Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s powerful statement echoes through time, challenging us to access our progress. In 1966, during a speech for a medical committee of human rights, he made a vital point. So of all the forms of inequality, injustice in health is the most shocking and the most inhuman. But I ask you all, how much have we truly changed since then? Unfortunately, at least to me, the answer remains disheartening. Despite the abolition of slavery over 150 years ago, Black Americans still face systemic disadvantage in healthcare. Shockingly, their life expectancy trails behind that of their white counterparts by 5 years. This is just one indicator among many healthcare injustice. This is undeniable disparity that forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth, which is the limited progress in the plagues of our health system. Having said that, in transition to a more recent topic, we must consider how technological advancements, particularly AI tools, are intertwined with the challenges we previously discussed. It's crucial to recognize that these technological transitions have frequently resulted in disparate outcomes for marginalized populations, significantly influencing their quality and quantity of life across generations. So these communities often experience underrepresentation in the positive impacts of technological transitions, while they are being overrepresented in the negative effects, including algorithmic bias, over surveillance, and so many other technological challenges. For the remainder of this presentation, I'll delve deeper into this point and I'll try to shed light on the issue at hand. To provide context for those of you who may not be familiar with some of the fundamental AI terms, I'll briefly define them for a smoother flow of information. So artificial intelligence is a broader category of technology that allows machines to imitate the ways humans think or learn and even act. So it encompasses natural learning processing, NLP, deep learning, and machine learning. Machine learning is a subset of AI that uses algorithms to aid computers in learning from training data by identifying patterns and making predictions. I'll discuss about this later. So deep learning is also a subset of machine learning that uses multi-layered artificial neural networks to emulate the functioning of the human brain, allowing it to recognize speech, analyze image, and understand natural language texts. So NLP is also a division of AI that deals with the connection between computer systems and people with natural language. So NLP involves devising algorithms and models that allow computers to process, comprehend, and generate language like humans. One frequently used term is LLMs, or large language models. They are a kind of AI models that have been educated on a huge set of text data to create and anticipate human language. So they basically generate the most probable next word or words based on everything they were trained on. For instance, if the prompt you are working on is about music and you say rock and dash, the model might say rock and roll. So they use the sum of all the human knowledge they learned using human brain learning strategies and combining it with brute force of computerization or computing. So this makes them astonishingly faster in understanding and solving challenges than humans. So AI models can further be categorized based on their functionality types, and they can be classified as narrow and general AIs. So narrow AI systems perform only one narrowly defined task or a set of related tasks, such as ChatGPT, which is popular nowadays, while general AI systems can carry out multiple intelligent tasks, demonstrating intelligent behaviors across a range of topics. To the best of my knowledge, I might be wrong, but there are no general AIs out there up until now, at least, not at least open to the public. So the current AIs we have are not sentient or conscious, even though the definition of consciousness is controversial, but they can exhibit behaviors that look like that because the learning models and training data, as I mentioned earlier, are from humans, and these tools develop a pattern based on their learning models. So undoubtedly, these AI tools have the potential to evolve many industries or to aid many industries, but they also come with significant limitations and concerns. I will explore the impacts of AI tools on equity, and I might use ChatGPT as a reference. So it should also be noted that because of AI's recent tremendous and exponential rise, regulators and policymakers all over the world are still trying to catch up. Moreover, the rate of how these AI tools is evolving as compared to the pace of societies can adopt to a rapid proliferation and growth is a mismatch. Hence, a lot is needed to be done to understand and mitigate these tools and the algorithmic biases associated with them and their potential negative impacts as well. So my aim in this presentation would be to highlight the advantages and challenges of AI technologies and to provide perhaps a recommendation for policymakers and stakeholders to address the impacts of AI tools on equity. So I think most of us are familiar with ChatGPT, but it's a good way of using it as a reference for our conversation's sake. So since there are a large number of AI tools that have been released, I'll just be focusing on this as a reference. So it's one of the most popular natural language processing models, and with over 100 million monthly active users. I believe it has also about 10 billion investment from Microsoft. So ChatGPT uses 300 billion words collected from internet, books, articles, websites, and posts, and provides services such as summarization, writing conclusions, citations, paraphrasing, translating language, writing policy memos, and so many other purposes are performed using this tool. So users also have one unique feature of introducing some kind of bias to this tool, and this option is called the up voting or down voting option. We will discuss about that later. So AI tools like ChatGPT have several limitations and concerns that we must address. These include the potential for misinformation, inaccurate or biased outputs, and harmful instructions in general. The issues labeled error with confidence, or as the experts call them, hallucinations, are common problems in all currently available AI tools. And they generate made-up outputs like misinformation, disinformation, fake news, fake image, or even sometimes fake videos. Another issue is that the upvoting and downvoting reward model that I was mentioning earlier can result in an uneven and biased reward system due to the human feedback and the implicit nature of bias in humans. So additionally, we must also consider concerns around propriety, copyright, privacy, commercial interests, because most of these AI tools are for profit. So these concerns can exacerbate systemic disparities and access limitations for underserved communities because of their paywalls, and other issues. So algorithmic biases are a major concern in AI tools and can occur at any phase of the algorithm's development and deployment. Biases in general can be viewed as an unfair prejudice that leads to a skew, resulting in unjust outcomes for any population. So in the context of machine learning, biases can result from errors in data aggregation. For instance, training biases can occur if the data used to train the machine learning programs is not representative of everyone, or excludes certain groups and characteristics in a population, or on the contrary, overrepresents other groups. So although these errors may seem harmless at first glance, the biases or inconsistencies are amplified and cause widespread harm to populations. It should also be noted that biases can start at the individual level, as I mentioned earlier, because of the human nature. And this leads many to believe that AI will be as good or bad as the human nature allows. Researchers categorize biases in 5 major buckets, even though there are many other classifications for biases, but I will be just highlighting these major buckets. The dataset bias happens when the diversity of the client base, for instance, patients in the electronic health record or any other data, is not well represented in the data used to train the machine learning algorithms. Association biases, on the other hand, are in a way cultural biases when they are reinforced or amplified by data used to train these models. Machine learning can pick up on human biases or implicit biases when training AI algorithms. Automation biases happen when social and cultural elements are ignored by computerization decisions. Although the algorithms are not answerable to people, they still have an impact on people. So that's something to think about. And confirmation bias is the tendency to perceive data in a way that supports preconceived notions. This could be content that matches what other people have already chosen to be presented by algorithms. Results from people who made less popular decisions are not included in such models. For instance, a knowledge worker who exclusively receives information from others who share similar points of views will never be exposed to opposing viewpoints and will be presented or prevented, from seeing alternative ideas or perspectives and different point of views in general. So I will give you real world examples, put things into context. So algorithms in healthcare have been around for a few years. Algorithms in healthcare has a huge potential to revolutionize the industry, but they can also perpetuate structural inequalities and biases. Let me start off by highlighting some of the AI triumphs in solving age-old issues in the healthcare. It has demonstrated astonishing results in, for instance, automatic cancer diagnosis, diagnosing malignancies like breast cancer years before any human could ever hope to diagnose patients. AI tools were also used in generating 3D mappings of complex protein structures in a matter of seconds. To put this in perspective with human capacity, the AI tools solved over 200 million protein structures known to science in a matter of a year or two. It would have taken 5 years or more for a human to solve and map one single protein structure experimentally, and billions of years to solve the 200 million plus structures. This is just an amazing leap forward in science, and this innovation has been linked with synthesizing malaria vaccines, developing new enzymes, and antibiotics and more. Having said that, the drawbacks of the technologies are also tremendous and affect the marginalized communities disproportionately by amplifying systemic disparities or systemic racism. Recently, most of you might have read or heard about this news. United Health Group was investigated by the New York State for its use of racially biased algorithms. The algorithms provided more complex treatment to white patients than sicker Black patients, as reported in the journal Science. So this incident highlights one of the main risks of implementing AI, unmitigated AI tools in healthcare, and the potential for discriminatory outcomes. Furthermore, algorithms may reflect existing bias and discriminations within healthcare system, leading to an unfair and inadequate care for marginalized communities. One important example is the use of zip codes. So zip codes are often used in algorithms to determine healthcare needs. However, in the past, the US explicitly segregated African American neighborhoods from white ones through policies known as redlining, using zip codes in algorithms to perpetuate racial inequality. And it is crucial to be aware of these biases when developing or deploying AI tools. So I'll give you one relevant example from our own projects. So at our incubator lab in the Racial Justice Technology Policy Program, we have 2 research teams studying the associations of algorithmic bias and healthcare outcomes in Black Persian persons. Their preliminary results, along with the reports from the CDC, indicate that Black Persian persons are 3 times more likely to die from complications of pregnancy and 2 times more likely to experience severe maternal morbidities. One of our research teams used the Sutter Health Inequality Index tool that employs AI systems to pull data from the electronic health records. Mind you, they have more than 28 hospitals and 108, I believe, clinics under the Certain Health umbrella. So, and this AI tool pulls data from the electronic health records. They found that Black birthing persons are underrepresented in the data that was used for the assessment of this index, demonstrating how algorithmic biases amplify systemic discrimination. Now I want to take you back to the issue I mentioned earlier that was noticed during the COVID pandemic, and I want to associate it with how it is intertwined or linked with technology. Recent studies by scientists at Johns Hopkins University and one professor from Tufts, her name is Professor Valencia Compson, have found that the inability to recognize Black and Hispanic patients who require COVID-19 therapy was caused by erroneous pulse oximeters. These pulse oximeters are tools that help healthcare professionals measure the oxygen saturation of a patient. And the same goes with infrared thermometers that also use the same technology and automated technique. And these devices determine significant clinical decisions such as admission, treatment, and Medicare approval for home oxygen treatment, hence resulting in a higher rate of COVID mortalities and morbidities in BIPOC communities. Therefore, there is a need for a higher ethical and objective standards when conducting these studies before even deploying this medical equipments and medications for use of the general population. So just to sum it up, algorithmic biases in healthcare can have far-reaching consequences, perpetuating existing inequalities and harming marginalized communities particularly. It is essential to be aware of these biases and to employ higher ethical and objective standards when developing and deploying these algorithms and healthcare technologies. Though there are so many unanswered questions, AI has now become an integral part of our lives. However, there is still unanswered questions surrounding AI tools and their impact on equity. For instance, who determines if AI tools outputs are suitable, correct, and free from harm? What mechanisms are in place to check AI outputs? For instance, the black box effect and the lack of understanding around how AI generates its answers also raises concerns. Just like the human mind and how it operates is not fully understood, how AI processes outputs is also not fully understood yet. Additionally, the importance of current and relevant representation of data used to train AI algorithms must be emphasized in any deployment of AI tools. There is this one interesting controversy that I want to think about and see. So the implementation of AI tools present controversies and challenges, particularly regarding the techniques used to reduce algorithmic bias. For example, the exploitation of labor in developing countries in reinforcement learning with human feedback may be problematic. A notable case study is the development of ChatGPT. So the company OpenAI outsourced Kenyan workers to detect and remove toxic and biased contents from ChatGPT's predecessor, ChatGPT-3. So this tool helped to detect and remove violence, hate speech, and sexual abuse in the wild by feeding an AI with labeled examples of these forms of toxicities. So to get those labels, OpenAI sent tens of thousands of snippets of texts to an outsourcing firm in Kenya, which included graphic and disturbing contents. Osama, the outsourcing firm, is based in San Francisco, and it employs workers in Kenya, Uganda, and India, and they pay them less than $2 per hour. Not only that, these workers are exposed to such toxic contents. Despite playing a fundamental role in AI development, however, these workers in data enrichment professions face uncertain working conditions, which may be the result of efforts to hide AI's dependence on this large, cheap labor force. So the use of outsourced labor and exposure to toxic contents raises concerns about the ethics of developing AI technologies that are worth billions of dollars these days. So some methods may end up diminishing or even eliminating the voice of marginalized communities, highlighting the needs for a more comprehensive regulatory mechanism to ensure algorithmic justice. So I want to conclude my presentation by forwarding some recommendations. So let us briefly discuss the solutions to the problems. I'm confident that you all have excellent recommendations and experiences in dealing with some of these issues, some of these challenges. First, we believe that establishing an anti-racism framework is critical to addressing institutional and systemic oppressions faced by marginalized communities. We must acknowledge and address the existence of systemic racism first, and work to eradicate it at an individual as well as in the broader systemic level. So changing policies, building trust in vulnerable communities, targeted interventions, supporting local initiatives, and promoting cross-sectional collaborations are all recommended to mitigate these challenges. So to mitigate systemic racism in healthcare particularly, testing devices rigorously, perhaps using skin tone as an objective measure, and improving accuracy by embedding smart features or smart apps is one thing that can be done. Similarly, AI algorithms or AI algorithmic biases in healthcare should be trackable and traceable. And there should be accountability and liability by algorithm developers as well. Institutional supervisions of healthcare facilities and training healthcare professionals to bolster the quality and safety of AI healthcare tools are among the few solutions that can help mitigate algorithmic biases in the healthcare system. So lastly, holding off on the development of some of the more advanced AI tools that can reason, plan, and most importantly, that can be connected to the internet is a good idea, at least for now. This, I believe, is the reason why the field experts have signed an open letter and calling for a pause in such developments. It is both dangerous and also unpredictable. So, algorithmic bias is a global issue. This should be noted. And that affects, it affects individuals and communities worldwide, regardless of their geographic locations. So this is the beginning of a new way of life for humanity as we know it in its entirety. Therefore, a global strategy is needed to develop a common understanding of algorithmic biases and its negative impact on society. Global society, in my personal opinion, should quickly adopt global regulations, laws, and perhaps even sign treaties to ensure the development of these technological regulations, which is going to be aligned with human values, of course. Such technology can identify and promote best practices, establish ethical standards, and promote accountability among all stakeholders. So global efforts is essential to ensure that technological advancements are developed and used in a way that is going to benefit humanity, while also minimizing harm and negative consequences. Without global cooperation, I believe the negative impacts of algorithmic biases will continue to disproportionately affect marginalized communities and perpetuate systemic injustices. So in conclusion, AI tools have enormous potential to revolutionize many industries, but they also come with significant limitations and concerns. Therefore, it is, I believe, crucial to have comprehensive regulatory mechanisms in place to ensure algorithmic justice and that the benefits of AI tools are maximized in an equitable fashion for everyone. These are the questions that I raised earlier. These are something that we all need to think about in our day-to-day practices. So thank you so much for your undivided attention. I apologize for taking too much time. If in case we are unable to accommodate a Q&A session, please feel free to contact me. I would be more than happy to connect and engage in future discussions with anyone who is interested. So I will now pass the stage to Gabby so that she can share her remarkable insight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ezra, and thank you, Gabby.
Yeah, thank you, Ezra. It was really interesting to hear those perspectives. And yeah, I know we don't have too much time, but happy to kind of do a quick overview into some of the things that we're working on. Before we kind of do deep dive into this, just to say, like, all of these opinions are my own. Like, I was not paid by my company to speak to you all today. So you'll see some things here which are just kind of my personal interpretations of like what my company is doing and how we're tackling AI and some of the value from it. So not like any work-related things that would get me in trouble or my company in trouble. All the so for those of you, I'm just going to do a quick little intro into what SAP is. It's a company that's very large that not many people have heard of. Same for SuccessFactors. And I don't know if we'll have time to do a demo, but I'll walk you through some of the AI use cases that I think are really interesting. I'll give you a little bit of a heads up into what we as a company who's in this space, working with Microsoft, working with OpenAI, are doing and how we're thinking about it. And if we do have time at the end, I'd love to share some perspectives of what I'm looking forward to within AI and how I think it's cool and help make, say, more just world in some regards, right? Of course, there's always accountability and all of these elements, but I think that it all depends on how we use it and the types of systems that are in place about it. Which is also, again, why I love this community, because I think it takes the partnership between the for-profit, the government, and the nonprofit side to kind of come together to build something that holds each other accountable, that moves us forward in a positive direction. So what is SAP? I actually asked ChatGPT because why not? It's an AI presentation. They gave me a very large, annoying answer about it being a German multinational software corporation.
Gabby, I don't think your audio is working.
So this gives us some time to mull over Ezra's questions and what we know about SAP while Debbie gets her sound on. No.
Very odd. Apologies about that. Yeah, so I was just telling you about SAP. Can you see my screen now? Yeah, let's hope. Great. And then I asked ChatGPT to tell me what SAP did, like they were talking to a child, and I like this answer so much more. It's a company that enables companies to streamline their business processes. It helps big businesses to organize and manage different things, like selling things, keeping track of money, and taking care of their workers. Love it. And I think while this is a silly example, it also is a cool way of thinking about some of the ways that accessibility can be addressed in making really complex things accessible, understandable, and then translating it so that people can then not feel as intimidated to approach a new subject, right? It's nice to have a toolkit that can explain things in different ways to different people based on what makes sense for you. And I think that's kind of the direction that people are heading towards. So SuccessFactors, they did the same thing. So sorry, this is a lot of text, but the quick version of SuccessFactors is that we are a human resources tool that helps companies keep track of their workers by setting goals, giving them trainings, checking in to make sure that they're happy, and providing opportunities for career development. And that's where my role is. So I work in our SAP SuccessFactors learning team. And what we are trying to do is trying to make learning more accessible, trying to get more people to do more learning, to understand skills gaps and progress throughout the organization. And SAP overall, like we are a German company. And because of that, there's a huge emphasis placed on data privacy and individuals' rights. So we actually established an AI ethics community. And I can put this link in the chat, but it's actually our SAP AI ethics page. So we have a set of values and principles that we work by whenever we're working with AI, right? Thinking about designing for people, enabling business beyond bias, striving for transparency. So whenever possible, if you're getting an AI recommendation, telling you why you're getting that recommendation, and trying to build in the human element of AI as much as possible to try to then drive an organization forward. And then within like our building product, right? First, we do a self-assessment of the use case based on those principles. Then we think about how we're planning for that compliance. And then there's even an approval process within the AI ethics steering committee. I'm gonna go super fast through this. Yeah, cool stuff. I like the reaction, Carmela. So some of the fun ones that are coming up on our radar is having a learning recommendation system, right? So knowing your career ambitions, right? And it really depends on the data that you're feeding into the system. So for us, we're trying not to take things like demographics or race into the recommendations that we provide you. But what we can do is if we know that you want to be a people manager or you want to be a marketing director, and if that's a future career ambition for you, we can then make intelligent AI-based recommendations for you and your learning style, right? So it really depends on the input data that you're plugging in for the types of learning recommendations that you get. And same thing for the job description generator. So this one I can send you all a link to, because I don't know if we'll have time for it. But one of the things that it did is that as you're creating a job description, it's checking for biases, right? It's going through and saying, instead of chairman, consider rephrasing this word because this might have a gender bias that people might not be considering and may deter people from applying. So you're able to use that technology to create more inclusive job descriptions that would appeal to people and remove some of the biases that would exist there. And then the interview question generator one is just, I think, kind of fun, right? And also kind of thinks to what I like about AI being an idea generator, right? And that kind of goes to one of the questions that was in the chat for Mina, right? Of how can I always be more inclusive? A lot of it depends on the questions that you're asking and the information that you're getting. So what I really love about the interview question generator is that it knows the job description that the person is applying for, and it'll generate some information about the job, some information just to get to know the person, and they can ask specific questions about stuff that's on their resume as well. So you kind of have the ability to be flexible and then to pick and choose the opportunities and the questions that you'd want to ask, therefore creating more variety and also like catering it to the person. So again, I can send you the demo because I don't think we'll have too much time, but I think just a cool thing and a cool way to see how we're applying some of that into our day-to-day lives and how we're thinking about AI when we're building it out. And another just super quick summary here. So yeah, I think for me in like the not so distant future, it'll be really cool to have more of like a objective way of looking at career progression. There's going to be biases in all sorts of processes that we're doing. But when you have more data, when you have the right inputs, and when you have like a governance board, you really have the potential to like set up a system that allows for equal opportunity. And what that means is that like if you know that you have like a certain skill level and you want to get to a different skill level, you're getting recommendations and you're getting a path forward versus what feels like subjective reasons for people getting hired or promoted. So I think it's a really interesting way to think about how are you being measured, how are you being evaluated, and when you have more of these like metrics and things that you can do to achieve it, it makes for hopefully a more just way of like progressing and getting into an organization. Yeah, sorry for the super rapid presentation, but happy to answer any questions as well.
Thank you so much, Gabby, for bringing your perspective from the tech field. And yeah, I know Gabby has a hard stop at 5, but I so appreciate that each of you, Gabby and Ezra, have offered to share resources, and I'll send an email out afterwards to everyone who's been on the call. And really love that this has Segal Fellows speaking and participating, Heller teammates speaking and participating, and Stevie as a Segal Fellow invited her service members to be on the call. So happy to have this community continue, and so thankful to Gabby and Ezra. I don't know if there's a quick question we want to try to get to before folks have to go.
I threw in the chat an interactive demo for AI tools. So you can actually click around and have an interactive value journey. So it'll touch upon the use cases that we just talked about and some of the benefits within that. So feel free to play around.
Stevie, go ahead if you have a question.
I didn't have a question. I just wanted to express appreciation for inviting us and letting me invite some of our friends from Literacy Minnesota's cohort. Just really great to see some of our literacy leaders here, and also getting to hear from everyone about this really important topic.
Well, I think the gratitude is there. I learned so much even just in an hour from what each of you shared, Ezra and Gabby, in the health world and the tech world and the policy and industry responses, ways that we can take action and as you said, across sectors, Gabby. So thank you guys for sharing these resources. And Ezra, if there are articles you want to share, I'll just send an email out to everybody and we can keep this conversation going and keep expanding it, because the work that each of you guys are doing is so important. And for each of you who've joined us in real time or watching this video later, the action that you'll take to make this a reality of keeping this in mind in your own work, in your own field, in your own sector is what's going to keep the value going. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having us come speak.
Yeah. I'll definitely
Thanks,
share the
everybody.
resources and I'll see you all soon. Thank you.